got a full class, so doesn't look like everyone's here though. Okay, we'll see what happens. All right, go ahead and pass these around and back. And around back. Okay, those. Back, please.
Take notes on their laptop.
I'll take a roll after we do after we go over the syllabus and stuff. Everyone get, there's 2 pages, everyone get that? There's 2 different pages. Go around. All right. Did everyone get both pages?
No, we need a couple more
Okay, so there's probably extras over here, or maybe
somewhere.
send the extras that way. I didn't count 3 bucks.
No, that's the first page.
Okay, so we are in zoology here, and there's a Canvas page for the class that I'll basically put extra information, study guides. There's also some videos posted on Canvas from when we were at home for COVID. So there's all kinds of resources here, but this is pretty much an in-person class, so we're not using Canvas really much other than just handouts and extra materials. So anyway, the syllabus I just handed out to you, I also have available on Canvas, so I'll pull that up here. And we'll go over that. Excuse me, I have a little pollen here. Let's see if this wakes up. Here we go. All right, so, okay. Anyway, so what we got going on is we are in zoology. I'm Morgan Hanford. I've been teaching here 26 years. Amazing. And anyway, I've been teaching zoology and biology 1 primarily since I started here. The major biology majors classes. And let's see here. My office is actually in the back hallway, right behind the back doors here. Office is right there, 1619. So you're welcome to stop by anytime. Office hours are posted there, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I guess. And then I have a phone number there, but just to note that, like for example, I just noticed yesterday there's a voicemail from June that I didn't get. So, if you leave me a message on voicemail, there's a good chance I won't get it for several days or a semester. So anyway, you can leave a voicemail or call me, but the absolute best way to get a hold of me or notify me of anything or ask questions is by email, or you can use Canvas Messenger, just as easy. I get both of those on my phone and at home, okay? So anyway, just to note, there's some people who just like to call, and I'm like, okay, probably not gonna get a hold of me. So anyway, let's see here. This class is part of a series of courses for biology majors. So if you are in this class, you probably are thinking about being a biology major, whether you're going into be a biologist or whether you're going into maybe medicine or veterinary or wildlife or forestry or resources type degrees or programs. This is a class intended for science majors. I know it also meets the requirement for a life science with a lab, which is great and everything for general education. But I would recommend that if you are not a biology major, that maybe you consider Bio-10 and Bio-10 Lab, because those classes are just a lot easier. I mean, there's a lot more straightforward, less time involvement, less studying. This class, you know, is intended to be the same level of class that you would take like at UC Davis or Chico or what have you. So we're gearing towards bio majors here, so it's a lot of you know, studying and preparation, etc. More so than Bio-10 is. Okay, so let's go ahead and just cruise down the syllabus here. Whoever came in later here, there's a syllabus running around. I think there's some extra copies in the back. Back to the table there. They'll help you out. There's 2 pages. Bring those up.
Thank you.
Okay, did everyone get the handout? Go in here. Okay, so we have, I'm not going to worry about the objectives here or learning outcomes. The textbook for the class is, it's the same book that we use for Bio 1. This is OpenStax Biology 2E, and this is a free online. You can log into this link, openstax.org, Biology 2E, and you can view the textbook as a free web page. You can download the textbook as a free PDF to your tablet or phone or your computer or what have you. And you can buy a hard copy of the textbook for relatively inexpensively. I think the bookstore might have some of these. They don't order these for me because I don't require a physical textbook, but occasionally they'll have, you know, a half dozen copies of this in the bookstore. I think they're like $70, $80 for the pair of these. Or if you go online to OpenStax directly or to Libris or Amazon, I think you can get these for like $50 or something like that. And so it's not that expensive. So you don't have to have the physical copy. Some people like to have the physical textbook. Also, some people get financial aid that pays for textbooks, so you know, it's on for you anyway. But that's the textbook. The reason why I use that is because textbook costs have gotten outrageous. We normally would have used a book like this, or actually would have used a book that was specifically a zoology textbook. But when the textbook prices got over $200, you know, I thought it was kind of silly. And also, you know, you end up not using the entire textbook anyway. So I decided to go with this open source textbook to save you some money. And there you go. All right, come on in. There is a syllabus running around here somewhere. Here you go. This is so if you came in late, you might want to grab a syllabus there. Okay, 2 pages. Okay, and then how we're going to do the class here is we're meeting Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 to 11:50, or just before noon. Typically, it's kind of flipped around in the schedule. Typically from 8 to 9, I'll do what I count as lecture content. This is like going through topics in zoology. We'll start off with looking at the history of evolution and the mechanisms for evolution, and then we'll get into physiology and adaptations of animals that have happened in the course of animal history. Anyway, that's the lecture content from 8 to 9, and we'll pretty much get started at 8. I understand there's traffic and there's construction and life and lack of caffeine and things like that. But we're just going to get going at 8, and we'll talk about zoology topics from 8 to 9. There will be lecture exams related to that. If you look at your syllabus that I handed out on the very last page, there's kind of a general outline of topics that we're going to cover. This isn't set in stone. This is just kind of a guideline to know where we're going and what we've covered. And so what you can see for lecture topics, probably by the end of September or so, within the first month, first 5 weeks, we'll have lecture exam 1, and that'll cover our first month or so of topics for the class, from August 20th to September something or other, 3rd week of September or so. And then we have a total of 4 lecture exams. There's 4 lecture exams. We'll have one every 5 weeks or so, all the way to the end. The 4th lecture exam is not cumulative, it's just stuff that we cover for the last portion of the class. So these lecture exams are written, so they're usually short answer, maybe provide a little diagram, a short explanation for a question, and I don't think I have any multiple choice tests or anything that's like fill in the blank. Usually kind of short answer, short paragraphs, etc. So they're written exams. On the exam dates, we will only do the exam. So we'll start the exam, at 8 o'clock or so, and the exam typically takes, a student who's prepared for the test probably would take about an hour and a half to do a little job. So, you have an hour and a half, that you probably need to complete the test. But if you want more time, we'll only be doing the exam that day. So you have, you can stare at it for 4 hours if you want to. But we won't have labs the day that we have lecture exams, all right? And then, that's half the class grade. The other half of the class grade is labs from roughly 9:10, 9:15 until 11:50. We will cover lab topics, which essentially is organismal diversity, morphology, adaptations, taxonomy, etc. And the lab portion is the portion that kind of is the most work in the class. I'll spend about 45 minutes or so covering the topic or the organism that we're looking at or the phylum that we're looking at for that day. And then I'll have specimens out for you to look at. I'll kind of tell you what you need to know for the test. And then it's up to you to document or figure out or, identify what you're going to be tested on and come up with some mechanism to study for that test. And then we'll have 3 lab exams. There'll be a lab exam probably end of September. There'll be a lab exam, probably middle of November. And then we'll have a 3rd lab exam at the end of the semester. And again, that 3rd lab exam will not be cumulative. It'll just be whatever we cover for the last 5 weeks of the class or so. Okay. So anyway, this will give you kind of an outline or an idea of what we're covering in the class. And the problem with zoology is that there's only a few things that you're graded on, right? 4 lecture exams and 3 lab exams. That kind of means that if you bomb one test, you're kind of spending the rest of the semester trying to make up for that. And so I would recommend. I know I've seen this with students in the past, where people kind of what do you call it, relax or just kind of take it easy, and we'll just see how hard the first test is, and then they bomb it, and then they're kind of now trying to play catch up the rest of the semester. So you probably want to, at the very beginning, be real diligent about taking notes and keeping up. And I don't have any homeworks or anything like that to do. This is like what you run into at UC Davis. You basically summarize material for a couple weeks, then take a test. Boom, that's it, right? It's pretty rigorous, all right? Okay, so let's see, what else are we happening here? As far as accommodations for missed exams, well, lecture exams would be relatively straightforward. I can do alternate test dates for lecture exams for people who have, if you have a medical emergency, or if you are sick, or there's some issue that you have an athletic event, you're an athlete, and you have to have a way to meet on an exam day. I can probably work with you on lecture exams because they're written. We can do kind of an alternative test day. The lab exams, though, are like, I can't redo them, right? I mean, I spend probably 2 to 3 hours setting up the lab exam. It's basically physical stations. I'll have microscopes and specimens set out. I mean, it takes me a couple, 3 hours to set these lab exams up. And then you come into the lab exam and you are essentially rotating around the room every 2 minutes, changing stations and answering questions at that station. It's called a lab practical. It's kind of a major thing in science classes, biology classes, where you actually are on the spot to answer questions about organisms. And so it's virtually impossible for me to recreate that lab exam for you. So I don't have the exact dates for the lab exams. I can kind of give you an approximation. If you, for some reason, are not going to be here for that lab exam day, you know, we'll talk about it, right? I mean, really discourage people from missing lab exams, but I really can't make those up in any reasonable way, all right? Okay, so as far as grading goes, I typically just go off with straight percent. 90% to A, 80% range is B, 70% range is C. I don't think it's really that challenging to get an A in this class, but typically we'll have 20 to 30% A's, 20, 30% B's, and then 20% the rest of them. But it just requires you to kind of take each exam seriously and make sure that you're prepared for them. And then let's see what else is on there. As far as dropping goes, this is a big class. If you're choosing to drop this class, you need to physically drop, because I won't drop you. And I think the last day to drop without records in about 2 weeks. And then the last day to drop with the W, I think, is sometime in early October. So just make sure that if you're going to drop a class, change your major or take it some other time, that you drop. There's always people who disappear, and then they're still on my roster, and I have to give you a grade in the end. So make sure you drop, okay? And I think that's pretty much it for the syllabus. Any questions? Looking good on that? All right, let me take roll on this, and we'll see who's here. We got a full class here. It's going to be a challenge here. I'll take roll, and hopefully I can get your name somewhat correctly pronounced. And then we're just going to hit the ground running with topics today. We're going to get going on with Chapter 1 content today, and then probably on Thursday we'll jump right into, I think it's chapter 12 and 13, which is on evolution. And we're going to go. Let's see here. All right, so Mia Baxter. Okay, Mia. Here, Mia Baxter's here. Riley Oistler.
Beauclair here.
Okay. And Riley Borden. Okay. John Borrego. All right. J.D. Brabeck.
Here.
All right. Joshua Bratcher. Okay. Kendra Bush.
Here.
Okay. Acacia Kovic. Okay. Elijah Davis. Daniela. Yep. Caitlin Easter.
I hope he comes up with
Brittany
dates for the lab exams.
Canyon Evanson. Caleb Flores. Braden Zara. Aliyah Gray. Sage Harner. Peyton Henderson. Rebecca Johnson. Isabel Kraus Bowen. John Lotley. John? Jenna Lunsford. All right, thanks, Jenna. Michael Malek.
It's no idea.
Malek. Did I get the first name right?
Yep.
How about Joel Nicholson? Lene Mink. Clark Moore. Brooke Naylor. Chris Nichols. Benjamin Pringle. Ariana Vilgas. Mike, whatever. May. Kylie White. No Kylie. Okay. Carly Ann Young. Okay. That's pretty good. Only two not here. Okay. So real quick, also we have this Canvas page. And a couple of useful resources here is, obviously the syllabus. Here's a link to the textbook. This gets you to the website where you can look at either the textbook on the web page or you can download it as a PDF. The cool thing about that is you can do a search feature of that textbook where you type a term in or a word or what have you, and it'll show you where in the textbook that phrase happens, which is a pretty cool option for online textbooks. I have the first lecture exams content kind of posted. These are video lectures that I made for zoology 4 years ago when we were, kind of locked down with COVID, and so you don't have to watch these videos, but if you think you missed something or want to have a little bit of a refresher on any topic, especially just before the exam, you might want to review those. I have a couple links. These are, they're outside resources that, are interesting. Usually it's only a page or two long, but oftentimes I'll provide you links to say, here's some additional reading or resources you might want to look out for the test. That will help kind of round out topics for the test. And then these lectures are usually by week, so this would be like today, this would be Thursday, and then next week, etc. And then here's a study guide. It's for last spring. We'll update it before our first test. But this is a study guide that just touches on topics that we've covered, and it's sort of a way to see if you know what's been going on for the last 3-4 weeks for the test. So one useful thing is to open the study guide ahead of time and kind of as we go along, if a topic comes up and it's on a study guide, it's probably a pretty important topic to cover. So that's our first lecture topic. We're going to have a lab today on taxonomy and classification. So this is a lab that's kind of getting you prepared for thinking about how organisms are named and how to construct phylogenies or look at evolutionary relationships among organisms. So that's the lab assignment here. And then we have our first lab exam set up. I have essentially our lab PowerPoints. People will often ask, do you provide your PowerPoints? So I said, well, I kind of do. They're in the videos for the lecture, and then they're also in videos and available as handouts in this lab content area. I don't hand them out though. I'm pretty much providing individual for people. So anyway, our first lab exam is going to basically cover all these topics here, and there you go. Here is a breakdown of last spring's grades. So you can kind of see how many points each exam was worth and what the high score was. I'll be updating these as we go for this semester. Right? This will change slightly as people do maybe a little better or not so good this time around. And then I'll have, as our next lecture exam and lab exam content comes up, I'll be opening those up so you can check those out. I just haven't pulled it up only to see what's going on right now. Okay. All right, everyone cool? We're looking good? All right, well, let's jump into some topics here then. Let's see how it goes. Let's see here. A couple things. One thing I want to talk about, and I mentioned this in Bio 1, so those of you who had Bio 1 have heard this. And so let me go ahead and make some editing here. This class, Zoology, is actually one of a series of classes that you take to transfer to a university for a biology degree or a life sciences degree. So oftentimes students will take zoology first in this sequence. I think because biology 1 has a prerequisite. The prerequisite is that you've had Chem 1A before you take biology 1, because we do a lot of biochemistry type stuff in Bio 1. It's also required for transfer that we have Chem 1A as a prerequisite for Bio 1. Anyway, so zoology is often the first class people take because there's no prerequisite for that. Or botany. Some students will take botany first, or they'll take zoology and botany in the same semester. But anyway, what you'll see here is that these three classes kind of touch on, a different series of topics. Zoology, we're going to cover animal diversity, physiology, evolution, those basic topics. In botany, they cover plant and fungus and produce diversity, physiology, adaptations, etc. And then in Bio 1, we cover biochemistry, cell biology, genetics, and ecology. So these three classes basically make up what would be a lower division life sciences core classes. If you go to Davis, they have, what would be called, I think it's like biology 115, 116, and 117. It's 3/4 of classes. They're all called biology, like biology 1A, 1B, and 1C, what they have at Berkeley. But what you'll notice is the class title is not the same. It's not like Bio 1, Zo 1, and Botany 1. Like at Davis, their one class will be on organismal diversity, and in that class you'll take they'll do animal diversity, produce diversity, fungus diversity, and then plant diversity. So it's essentially, you're in one class you're getting kind of these two topics somewhat. In another class, they cover evolution and physiology. And then in a third class, you'll get ecology and genetics and molecular biology. And so what you'll see is that, like at Davis, you're getting all the same topics. It's just they scramble up what class you're getting those in, right? So you're getting the same subjects, but it's not in the same class group. But anyway, so why I'm saying this is if you take Bio 1, Zoology 1, and Botany 1 here at Shasta College, Davis and Chico and Humboldt basically accept that package as the equivalent of their intro classes, right? The problem is if you don't complete all three of these classes and then try to transfer, you may find it virtually impossible to make up a class, or you may find you have to basically make up more than you needed to if you transfer without all three. So here's an example. I had a student years ago who was going to go to Sacramento State University to get a biology degree, and she took Bio 1 and Zoology 1 and said that she's just going to take botany when she gets to Sac State. When she got to Sac State, there was no botany class. They don't offer botany there anymore. They have a biology series that's organismal diversity and physiology and evolution. They basically do an integrative biology type approach rather than this traditional approach. And so she had to put her Sac State deal off for one semester while she took classes at Sierra College to make up the class she should have taken here, right? So just note that there really is no kind of shortcut or custom program in life sciences. It's a package. You take these classes, and then you apply to transfer, and these classes will then serve to be the equivalent of the freshman, sophomore level classes you were taking at Davis or what have you. So just as a note, you probably should be really thinking about completing all three, Bio 1, Zoology 1, and Botany 1 while you're here. Also, you'll probably along the way pick up Chem 1A and Chem 1B because those are required to get your biology degree. And if you do that, we have an associate's degree. I think it's an AA degree in life sciences you can get along the way here just by taking the prerequisite classes to transfer. So consider that. The only time where you wouldn't have to take all three for your transfer, and you know who you are, it's kind of rare exceptions. Students who are planning to transfer to a PharmD program, like a pharmacy program, I think there's a pharmacy program like at Southern Oregon University or something like that, maybe Oregon State. And I think in that case, they ask you to take Bio 1 and Botany, but not Zoology. And then I think the fisheries program at Humboldt, they want you to take Bio 1 and Zoology, but you don't have to take Botany, right? So you'll have to look into your specific program. But what I want to point out is that, these days, there really is no shortcuts. There's no I'm going to take my custom path if I want to, do the status quo. It's becoming much more just kind of streamlined in terms of everyone should be taking the same classes and doing the same thing. I see this a lot with students who have a aspiration to go to medical school or to be a doctor, and they think that they should be taking anatomy here. And then they learn after taking a 5-year anatomy class, and our anatomy class doesn't count towards doctor school, right? So just be aware of the classes. Just because you think it's part of the program doesn't necessarily mean it is. So if you're ever curious about that, certainly ask me. I'm very familiar with transfer tracks and what's worked for people in the past. But just make sure that you're on the right track. That being said, if you are planning to go to medical school, you shouldn't be in micro and anatomy here at all. Ignore those classes if you're taking these three. And you'll take anatomy and micro when you're in medical school. So that's the deal there. Okay, sound good? All right. Okay, so that's that. Let me see here. I want to talk a little bit about the topic that we're going to cover today for the rest of the half hour here for lecture content. I want to cover some information about the scientific method, scientific process. Kind of what about biology is scientific? And so let's go ahead and take a look here at a topic which is okay. So usually, the first chapter of a textbook will the first chapter of every biology textbook is basically the same. It's what is biology? So biology, the study of life or life's processes, or zoology, we're basically studying on animal physiology, morphology, and evolution. So these are all, presumably science classes. And so what I want to talk about, which is covered in usually the first chapter of every bio textbook, is what is science? What is the science process or the scientific process? And it's really interesting. I think, especially in recent times, science has come up in the news a lot, especially with COVID and wanting to understand facts about things in human health or in the environment. And so science has kind of become a much more kind of mainstream kind of idea or way of knowing things. Now, I want to make sure everyone understands kind of the process of science. It's not that science really has all the answers or is the only way to understand things. Science really is just a process for how to answer questions. It's really kind of the main way it goes. It's not like science is right and everything else is wrong. it's just a way of understanding or interpreting questions and observations. So, what I want to point out here is that science usually starts, or it's kind of really an observation-based discipline. So, observation, essentially, we're observing phenomena or seeing things, and in nature around us. Like, for example, for zoology, we'd be seeing things like, we want to know something about deer populations. Shasta County has deer hunting season comes up, or we want to know something about invasive weeds and how to get rid of them, right? So I'm just throwing out some ideas of observations that we might make, on a day-to-day basis, even as non-scientists. And then from those observations, we generate questions. So a question would be like, why? Why does this happen? I guess we're looking at why is this phenomenon or this observation something that we need to be concerned about, or what causes this phenomenon, right? So anyway, that's all fine and dandy. We have observations and questions. Usually is the start of every scientific process. Where science differs from other disciplines would be in how the question is addressed. And so here is where science really deviates from other disciplines or topics, and that would be hypotheses. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we make this plural, even though the overhead is showing hypothesis as a singular. Really, in science, the scientist or group of scientists should be coming up with as many plausible explanations for a question as possible. So not just one, what you'll hear me say again and again this semester as a sexy hypothesis or a convenient hypothesis or an easy hypothesis. Oftentimes, we come up with hypotheses, and then whatever just seems like it's the most convenient or works for our frame of mind, we'll accept that as what the answer is. And we're going to see again and again this semester that that's kind of gotten into problems in science, in that at some point in time you'll learn that hypotheses aren't supported or they're not true, and you have to kind of reject them or get rid of them. So hypotheses, what a hypothesis is and what makes science unique is hypotheses are basically hypotheses have a couple features about them that in science that are kind of unique. For one, all hypotheses have to be testable. Okay? And so testable, what that means is the hypothesis should be available for testing, meaning that we can actually do an experiment where we can verify whether the hypothesis is true with physical evidence, and the hypothesis should be falsifiable. And what that means is we should be able to reject the hypothesis. The hypothesis should be something that we can prove or demonstrate is wrong. So those are kind of like the two main features of a scientific hypothesis that make science hypotheses very different from other. Okay? So generally speaking, what happens is we come up with hypotheses. Normally it would be a bunch of hypotheses. We can do hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2, hypothesis 3, and there could be a dozen possible hypotheses. And in good science, you would come up with as many possible hypotheses as you could. And then one by one, you you subject them to testing, rigorous experiment or observation. And your goal is to reject or get rid of hypotheses that don't stand up to testing. And what you're left with are basically hypotheses that have not been rejected. They have not been falsified, or they have not been proven wrong by your testing. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the basic science process. There's more to it here, but we'll go ahead and flesh that out a little later. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example. It's all kind of like abstract right now, but let's apply it to a real scenario, like this organism, right? What critter is this? What organism is that? It's a giraffe, right? So the giraffe, this is kind of an obscure organism, right? A giraffe has kind of weird features. It's the tallest mammal that is alive today. I think the male giraffes can get up to like 18 feet tall or something like that, and they're really tall. Where do they live? What's their habitat? Is that savanna? Yes, savanna grasslands, the tropical grasslands of Africa. So observation. This observation has been made, for a long time in human history. But probably the first scientific observations would have been like probably in the 1700s, explorers, etc. going to Africa would have seen these and brought stories about them back, to Europe, etc. Certainly Jean Lamarck and Darwin wrote about giraffes, and we'll talk about them on Thursday probably. But anyway, I guess the observation is, obviously giraffe. And then the peculiar feature about the giraffe, of course, is this, long neck and long legs. Why does it have these kind of obscure features? So I guess the observation is it has a long neck, long legs, tall organism. A couple other features about these things is those having a long neck causes some problems. One thing about the giraffe is it actually has the highest blood pressure of any animal. It actually has the highest blood pressure because they have to, essentially the heart is located here, and they actually have the largest heart per animal size of any animal as well. Their heart is the largest on a size basis relative to the organism's mass, because they have to pump blood all the way up here, like 9 feet up to their brain, and so the blood pressure in their carotid artery is the highest of any animal. Also, as I showed here, there is some issues with things such as drinking water. Getting down into a water bowl, requires them to kind of spread their legs. It's kind of like me picking up my keys with my groaning. But there's a lot of kind of negatives with having these kind of obscure body features. Birthing problems. Imagine giving birth to such a dangly offspring. So clearly, there's got to be some advantages or some reason why these animals have the long neck, right? So, to be a good scientific, so here's our question: why the long neck, right? Well, why would they have this long neck feature? Why would giraffes have these kind of obscure body proportions? That's our question. So, a hypothesis. The one thing to note here is a hypothesis is it's a statement. It's usually kind of a one-sentence short statement that attempts to explain or to answer the question. So let's come up with some hypotheses. Why the long neck? What's their use? Is that to get their food? So that would be one. Let's go ahead and write it down here. So let's see here. Hypothesis 1, feeding advantage, right? Meaning, so kind of give me some ideas, like what would be the advantage of feeding? They can reach food that other animals can't, right? Feeding advantage. So they can reach the top of the trees, the zebras can't, so they have access to food resources that other animals don't have, and that's the benefit, right? Sound good? Okay, so, but you know, to be a good scientist, we need to not just go with what is just the convenient answer here. And I know the feeding advantage thing was something that, Lamarck wrote about it. Lamarck, back in the 1809, when he wrote the first book on mechanisms for evolution, mentioned the giraffe and said, well, obviously, that a feeding advantage is what's going on here. Darwin wrote about it being a feeding advantage, that giraffes are able to get resources other animals can't. And this is probably something that people learn, on their third grade trip to the zoo, the feeding advantage. But we need to be good scientists and come up with maybe some other hypotheses, because we don't want to just go stop with what's convenient. So what about some other ideas? Yeah?
Intimidation.
What's that?
Intimidation.
Intimidation, like scare off the zebra? Or
Don't they use their necks for fighting, the longer neck?
so, what do I write down? So they're using their necks to, who are they intimidating?
Predators.
Predators, okay. So predator defense? Like, they're kind of scaring off the lions, or maybe they can even see the lions before anyone else does. Like, they kind of have a lookout, right? And the lions are coming. That's probably the main predator of lions. And so they see the lions coming, and the giraffes can get running first. You know the story there. If the lions are coming, you don't have to run faster than the lions. You have to run faster than your buddy, right? So that's the idea. Okay, predator defense. Okay, and then what else? I heard some other things out there. What did you have over here?
Oh, I was for mating, don't use the necks, they fight for it.
Okay, so like a mate competition. Mating competition? Mating advantage. Okay, anything else? We're not limited to just 3. It should be as many hypotheses as possible. Anything else? Yeah.
It's like a dominance, like effect for the 2 males, the fight and everything.
Okay.
Use their necks.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and say that for a meeting benefit, for sexual selection. That's a good idea. Anything else? Okay, well, we can leave the floor, open here in case something else pops up, But anyway, okay, so the important thing here is that basically these hypotheses should be testable and falsifiable, right? And that would be the ideal. And okay, so the feeding advantage explanation has been kind of the one that has been written about and tossed around, and it's been found in zoology books for probably the last 200 or so years. And Lamarck wrote about it in 1809. Darwin wrote about it in 1859. Other zoologists have written about it. What's interesting is that no one really bothered to test it until about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. There was a couple of zoology grad students at Oxford, Cambridge, that decided that, this kind of explanation that giraffes have long necks for the feeding advantage, needed to be tested. And they're, and so they decided to go to Africa and observe giraffes feeding in nature. And So here's kind of a summary of their data. And so male giraffes are, like I said, about, that's in meters. So 6 meters is a little over 18 feet, right? 18, 19 feet. Male giraffes are about 6 meters tall, and they can reach up as high as 7 meters, which is like 21, 22, 23 feet. They can reach as high as 22 feet or so up into the tree. Female giraffes are more like about 4.5 or so meters tall, so a little shorter than males, and they can reach up, to about 17, 18 feet to get their food. The females are a little smaller in size. So what they noticed, though, this is kind of interesting, is that this on the y-axis here is the frequency of how often they feed. So the bigger the little blob here, it means the higher the frequency of where they're feeding. And what you'll see is, for the most part, giraffes, even though they can reach up to 21 feet as males or 18 feet as females, they spend most of their time feeding at shoulder height. So they spend most of their time feeding at 3 meters, which is about 9 feet, and the females would be feeding at about 2.5 meters, which is about 7 feet or so. And so this is kind of more typically the scenario of feeding. It's not that they want to feed up high. It's that most of their food is basically kind of at shoulder height, which is where impala or other animals can easily. Anyone who's had goats know that they can reach up 6, 7 feet, no problem, right? So anyway, and furthermore, what's interesting is if the feeding advantage hypothesis was the reason, think about this. If there was limited food resources and the only food available was the very tops of trees, wouldn't males outcompete females and basically the males would survive and the females would starve? And that wouldn't really look good for the population, right? That wouldn't really help their reproductive success or what have you. So this study that was done I think it was 1998, 1999, just before 2000 or so, basically kind of rejected or put into serious question this idea of a feeding advantage. And in fact, with the whole idea that if the males were taller than the males would outcompete the females, essentially they decided that the feeding advantage needs to be rejected. Pretty good. All right, so now we're stuck. Now we've had 200 years of believing the feeding advantage was the reason why giraffes have long necks. So now we need to go and look at some other hypotheses. And this is great. You can go to YouTube and you can YouTube videos of giraffes out there in nature. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on here. And so we can kind of be like, YouTube biologists here. And so we'll type in giraffe. And look at this. Giraffe fighting. Top thing here. All right, let's go take a look at these guys here.
Stink lingers deep. Clean deep with new Arm & Hammer Deep Clean Detergent.
All right, so here's some giraffes out in the wild. And these are 2 males. And what they're doing basically is they're kind of sparring or fighting. So how the giraffe societies work is they're kind of like horses, where the herd is mostly females and young males. So the herd is mostly kind of maternal based. The mother, the maternal female giraffe, and usually a series of daughters. And then if there's any males in there, they're all immature or juvenile males. Once the males hit reproductive age, they're kind of kicked out of the herd by the females, and a dominant male will kind of lurk around or hover around the area to basically have access to mating. So when a competing male shows up and wants to have access to mate, the male that is already there will fight him. And they use their necks basically as a club or a weapon to do this. You also see this behavior in the close, ooh, ouch. That one took it down. Like a head fake. Boom. Okay. Now sometimes the males will actually kill. They'll get killed. I mean, they'll get either killed or they'll get so seriously injured that they end up being taken by predators and they're ineffective. So I mean, it's a serious fight. You also see this in the giraffe's closest relatives, which would be like camels and llamas. You ever see llamas fight? You know, llamas, they're spitting thing, but I think giraffes do too. But llamas use their neck to kind of they do like a little snaky fight dance where the males will kind of push each other around with their necks. So the necks seem to kind of be more associated with this mating advantage here, where the males will use their necks to kind of like how deer use antlers, or the male deer, the bucks will use their antlers to fight other males for mating dominance. Also, they found that females, you know, if given a choice, prefer the males that have the longer, taller features. Okay, so I guess the question then is, if mating advantage, you know, males having longer necks to fight off, fight for mating opportunities, why do females have long necks? Yeah, well, I mean, because their daddies did, right? So it's likely that not all these features are sex-linked, and realize that a lot of features that are selected for, even though this is a sex selection, are found on non-sex chromosomes. So it's likely that females that have long necks will possibly produce male offspring that have long necks. And so it's the idea of a population advantage. We could just as easily go into the predator defense mechanism, but you get the idea. What I'm trying to emphasize here for science is that a scientific process usually starts with an observation, whatever it is. We have a question, and it's really crucial in science to come up with as many plausible hypotheses that you can come up with. Even outrageous hypotheses should be come up with, but outrageous ones will usually get falsified pretty easy. But the thing to note is all of these are testable and falsifiable hypotheses. They have to be subject to testing, and they have to be falsifiable. Even if they're not falsifiable today, they should be testable at some point in time in the process. Okay, so why this is important is that we have all kinds of inquiries and studies out there that seem like they're science, but they're not. Okay, so and in our area we have kind of this legacy or this sort of legend or history of Bigfoot, right? You probably all heard about Bigfoot. If you drive from Reading to the coast to Eureka or Arcata, you go through Bigfoot country. I think even in Willow Creek there's like a Bigfoot museum. Anyway, so the story of Bigfoot, in my understanding anyway, is that when European settlers or miners and prospectors showed up in California in the 1800s or a couple hundred years ago, there was already kind of a legend. The Native Americans had a legend about maybe a Bigfoot type creature or a human-like creature that lived out in the forest or whatever. So the stories had kind of gotten around. And then in the late 1960s, early 1970s, someone took a little home movie, like a Super 8 movie. This is pre-video, but a home movie of a hairy, ape-like human creature walking on the banks of the Smith River up in Siskiyou County. And People claim to have found large foot impressions out in the forest, etc. And from 1970s through the 80s and even to today, there is this basic notion that there is a Bigfoot out there, and waiting to be found, right? So anyway, this is interesting because this is a great example, or this is a premier example of what we call pseudoscience. And pseudoscience is really interesting. The term pseudo means fake or not true, right? Pseudo means false or not real. And of course, so what we're saying is this is not true science and not real science. But the issue is pseudoscience often looks very scientific. So we can go out into the forest and we can go look for Bigfoot, right? We can take GPS, on our phones. We can take drones out there. We can use infrared cameras. We can use trail cameras. We can use satellite imagery to figure things out. We can invite PhDs and people who are professors to come with us. It can all look very, very scientific because of the equipment and the degrees of the people involved. But fundamentally, we have a problem with the science process. Okay, so the observation is, there was a movie taken of a Bigfoot creature on the riverbank in the early 1970s. People have claimed they've found footprints that they've taken casts of. People have claimed they've seen Bigfoot. So the observation is, essentially we have people claiming that there is this Bigfoot creature out there. I guess the question is, does Bigfoot exist, right? I mean, is that the question? Like, is there a Bigfoot, or is there a Sasquatch, or Yeti, or whatever you want to call it? But here's the issue. So the question's reasonable. Does Bigfoot exist? What's the hypothesis? The hypothesis has to be a statement. It's not a question, right? So the hypothesis is Bigfoot exists, right? So here is our hypothesis, our pseudoscience hypothesis. Bigfoot exists. Okay, so the problem is we can't falsify this hypothesis, right? I can't go out and falsify that Bigfoot exists because, well, if I think Bigfoot's here, well, Bigfoot heard you coming, and so took off and, didn't want to be seen. And so, essentially, you can't falsify a negative. If Bigfoot doesn't exist, we can't falsify that negative process. So, so this is an example of pseudoscience where, it's essentially a hypothesis that can never be falsified. So as a result, because of the way hypothesis testing works, meaning that when you reject a hypothesis, you're left with the remaining hypothesis that has not yet been rejected. And so they're still there, and they're basically now used as explanation. So the pseudoscience is a problem because it's essentially developing non-falsifiable hypotheses that never ever go away. All right, so now there are people who believe Bigfoot exists, but that's a belief structure. It's not based in science at all. Now this seems kind of provocative. I mean, we can all say that the Bigfoot example is kind of silly, but pseudoscience happens around us all the time. Here's an example of a similar inquiry. If you've ever heard of this Ivorybill woodpecker story, the Ivorybill woodpecker was a species of woodpecker that occurred in cypress swamps in Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And it was native to these cypress swamps that occurred in the South, the swamps of the South, from 1900 till about 1940s. What happened was, and there's specimens. They actually have stuffed specimens of these in Smithsonian Museum and at Cornell University. You know, it's a species that has been documented, and we actually have pelts and skeletons of them remaining. So when World War II happened and they had to build more ships for World War II, the cypress swamps in Mississippi and Louisiana were clear cut because cypress trees are really good for dock pilings. Cypress trees don't rot in water, they're kind of like redwood. And so you can cut the cypress down and you can use the timbers for piers and docks in the ocean water, and they'll last a long time. So the cypress swamps were clear cut, and the last physical observation, last specimen ever collected of the ivory-billed woodpecker was like in 1945. And from then, it's never been seen again. Until about 20 years ago, a couple bird biology professors from Cornell were canoeing in the cypress swamp regrowth in Mississippi, and they claimed they saw an ivory-billed woodpecker. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service basically put the ivory-billed woodpecker back on the existing species list. But for the last 20 years, no one's ever collected one or found one or gotten really good physical evidence, feathers, poop, or anything that they can do DNA testing on to see if the bird exists. But the ivory-billed woodpecker is being used as a means to preserve cypress swamps in Mississippi as a policy, right? So this is a great example of pseudoscience that is being done by scientists and science organizations, probably for other agendas. But what I want to point out is that pseudoscience happens all the time, all around us, and it's kind of up to you as a scientist to begin to really question if these hypotheses are testable or not. And so it's kind of an interesting example. But other examples, might be like dietary supplements. Like some people take echinacea for, to help their immune systems or what have you. There's no evidence that echinacea has any physical health benefits, but people still take it. So again, pseudoscience is all around us. And it's important to kind of be aware of this, especially with science being much more in the mainstream and the media, to understand, whether hypotheses have been rigorously tested or if they're even testable at all on a hypothesis. Okay, so I think we're going to stop there. We pretty much got through chapter 1, or the things that are necessary to understand for chapter 1. Probably on the exam, I will have maybe a brief question about what makes a scientific inquiry valid, or what makes a scientific hypothesis scientifically valid. And you should remember along the way that everything needs to be testable and falsifiable. Our lab today is kind of implying this. We're doing that today. And you should also kind of have an understanding of what pseudoscience is and why this is a problem for trying to understand hypotheses. All right, let's take a break, like a 10-minute break, 9:15. I have a handout for you to get during this break. I'll put the handout over here on this side. It's 2 pages. So get that handout, and we'll meet up again at 1:15. Right. Did everyone get the handout? You didn't get the handout, it's right here. Looks like there's a lot left, so I don't think everyone has it. So make sure you get that. Go ahead and just jump up and grab one while I'm opening it up here. So this is an exercise called cladistics and phylogenetics. So